Welcome to Prose and Cons, a podcast by writers for writers, brought to you by Precipice Fiction. Precipice Fiction would like to acknowledge the people of the Eora and Durag nations as the original custodians and storytellers of the land this podcast was created on.
Hello, welcome once again to Prose and Cons, a podcast by emerging writers for emerging writers. And right now it's just me, Phoenix, here alone in this little podcast room. Because we have something a bit different for you today. We have another interview, this time with C.M. Kosemen. I'm very excited. We got to have him on the show. He's the author of All Tomorrows, All Yesterdays, subsequently All Todays, as well as an overall just incredible artist, surrealist painter, illustrator. He's all over the board. One thing I love about his work is he pulls quite a lot of influence from his knowledge of evolutionary biology, a topic of which he's very well read. And because of that, his work is made all the richer for it. His worlds feel real and gripping, plausible. His credibility as an author is just, you buy in right away. And for that, I highly recommend his work. But enough said here. I'll cut over to the interview, and you can hear more from him himself. Hope you enjoy. Yeah. So where are you recording from?
I'm recording from Istanbul, Turkey. Yes, it's a 30-degree day. That's for your American listeners. It's like 86 degrees or something.
Yeah, that's about right.
And yes. The blood temperature the same as the warmth of warm tea. It's a very lazy morning for me.
That's amazing. Yeah, I can feel it already on the air. It's only 7:30 here in Barcelona, and it's already feeling pretty warm.
Ooh, early day.
Yeah.
So you live there like for like a sabbatical or are you like always in there? How's it go? Do you do any other work?
So I work as a freelance editor and writer. So I'm moving. I'm not bound to any location. But my wife and I have been moving around quite a bit recently. So she's from Chile. I'm from the States. We met in Australia. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
And now we're living here.
Nice. Well, if you ever visit my part of the world, let me know. And I'd be happy to like show you around the town and introduce you to the many beautiful and weird parts of this nice, interesting, crowded city. But don't do it during the hot season.
Yeah. No, that'd be awesome. I've been to Istanbul once.
Okay.
For 5 days, only like back when I was 21, I think, 20 or 21, right around there. And it's an overwhelming city. It's in an amazing way. But like, I just remember I've never seen a street that crowded before. That main like sort of artery that you guys have.
Yes.
What is it called again?
It's called Istiklal Street, but I call it the street of heads, literally. Like it's a carpet of smarmy human heads and backs of necks and stuff. It's really teeming.
Yeah.
Well, that place kind of suffered, to be honest. It's been like, I mean, if you can picture the flight of Times Square, I think you get a rough estimate. So, I mean, it attracted all the wrong crowd from international visitors and locals. And it's just like, there are still like on the side streets, there are like oases and like nice places where you could hang out and like see interesting places. But mostly it's become like shisha bars and like these very weird ruffian tourists only men, the kind of yeah. It's become like foot massage, tattooist, shady nightclub, shady tattoo parlor, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, I remember it very much. Never have I felt more like I was in a river of people, like an actual river. It was really something. We'll go ahead and launch right in then. So for all those listening at home, I'm joined here today with C.M. Kosemen. And you go by CM or Mimo or Memo?
I go with Memo, that the Memo is the M in CM Kosemen. And my real name is Cevdet Mehmet Kosemen. But at one point years back, I realized if I want to speak to a more international community of readers and friends, then I'd better have a more memorable moniker. And I
Mhm.
looked at my favorite sci-fi writers. Arthur Clarke was A.C. Clarke. There's
Yeah.
Steve Sterling, so he's S.M. Sterling. So I said, yeah, I think this like two initials and interesting last name combination goes well.
There's a
So I
pattern there.
I kind of stuck with that. And lo and behold, slowly but surely, I am becoming slightly known in certain circles, and I can't complain.
No, no, so for those of you that don't know, Memo here is the author of All Tomorrows, which
Mhm.
is you can listen on YouTube. It's
Mhm.
a very gripping story. We're going to get into that more.
Mhm.
As well as the co-author, co-creator of All Yesterdays,
Mhm.
and just a smattering of other artistic endeavors.
Yeah.
I had to look at your CV, and honestly, I was like, whoa, I can't really pin this guy very much. He's all over the board. But there are through lines, but I love that.
Yeah, I've been lucky as an artist, a painter,
Mm,
an author, and also on the sidelines as an illustrator.
mm.
I also have a day job. I'm a copywriter for advertising and PR companies, so still hustling for an honest lira. So there's that
Yeah,
too. But I think like if somebody's aunt asks, I said I'm an artist and an author, and I think that
nice.
covers it. And if I get the question, what kind of art you do? I'm like, I'm a surrealist painter.
Hmm. That was actually the second question I had for you. Oh no, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
it's the third question.
Mm-hmm.
Is if someone asks you at a party, what do you do? I was gonna ask you to describe that because I thought that would help. So,
Well,
surrealist author
yeah, yeah,
and a writer.
yeah. If I had to boil it down to like only one word, I would still pick artist, I think.
Mm.
And but yeah, that short answer took years to perfect. I mean, I was very awkward. Like I kind of draw dinosaurs, but like if they evolve differently, and then I look and the person is already in the other end of the room. But if they only knew.
I love that
So
as a description so much. I kind of draw dinosaurs like if they were different, and it's like that's what I do.
yeah, but I think that's many of us in this day and age find ourselves in this role, huh? I mean, I'm sure like you got multiple hats, and most creative people I know have multiple hats.
Oh yeah,
And it's just a sign of the times, I guess.
yeah. It's amazing how because I started as an engineer actually. That's what I went to school
Mm-hmm.
for, and it was always nice to give that answer to people because it's so like everyone has a story around engineer. It's like impressive, blah.
Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed it's a lot easier now to again give that answer now that I have like freelance editor under there and stuff. It's very easy
Mm-hmm.
to say editor and writer. It's like very digestible.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's I felt good when I landed on that answer.
yes, yes. I think like figuring that out is like one third of the way, and after
And
that, you're good to go.
sometimes once you find that answer, you start becoming that, even once you just start saying that.
Yeah, yeah. And in due time, it also gets to stick on you, but that's a whole other can of worms.
Mm.
So I'd rather answer your questions than rambling onto tangents of my own.
Okay, so how we usually start these episodes is we have a bit of a panel on these usually.
Mm-hmm.
So we usually go around and just see kind of where everyone's at right now. What are they? So like, what are you watching? What are you
Mm-hmm.
reading? What are your current, present artistic like pools that you're
Mm-hmm.
dipping into?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice, nice. So let me start by what I'm reading actually. I'm this past month I've been reading the collected works of Lewis Mumford, that's
Mm,
Mumford, and basically he's an American, well, he's a bit like what we just described. technically he's an architectural and art critic,
Oh yeah.
but in practice, he's a real visionary thinker, and I think a very inspiring for me, very inspiring philosopher.
Mm,
So he starts off from architecture and basically writes a form of the Ted Kaczynski philosophy that
mm,
doesn't involve trips to the post office, and that's less paranoid. I think his philosophy basically, Lewis Mumford is all about warning against the effects of overt mechanization in society,
mm.
starting slightly from architecture, but like he's a cranky old guy, and he just like the way he writes, so succinct. I mean, and long story short, every few pages in this book, he drops a bomb. Like, basically, he's talking, for example, about the city plan of San Francisco
Mm,
and how that like mesh of grids was like irresponsibly imposed into that terrain of undulating hills and stuff.
mm,
And he basically says when people proposed like curving paths that hugged the contours of the hills,
mm.
the response was, "Oh, that's how cows walk." But he said, "If you were only as smart as cows," and then
All right.
so there, that sort of guy. But so that's what I'm reading on one end. What I'm watching, I don't know, a whole other stuff. There's this TV series. It was 6 years old, and we are recording in 2023. So it's like Halt and Catch Fire. It's
Oh,
the it's this kind of like
I don't know why that sounds
kinda
familiar.
kinda smarmy, but also like watchable selections from the lives of these tech developers in the 1980s. And
Ooh.
it's basically like, I mean, when you're talking about food, you don't eat like sophisticated French cuisine all the time. You sometimes have to have Cheez-Its and marshmallows, and that's that for my viewing regimen. So yeah, it started out as a really nice series, but I'm in the second season now, and there are these characters that are just, I mean, coolness is oozing out of every pore of these guys, and I don't know, you just episode after episode watch what they're up to, and it's tolerable, it's nice. So that's what I'm watching these days. I'm also watching some like old Hammer House of Horror films on YouTube. Those are still free
Ah, okay.
with Sir Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing in them. There was this one about giant leeches taking over a quiet British town, and those things I really watch and I
Oh,
really
I gotta
enjoy
write this
them.
down.
Yeah, I forgot the name, but I think it's like the creeping brain terror or the crawling brain terror or something like that.
Oh my gosh. It sounds like I'm unfamiliar with this. It sounds like I picture like 1950s horror, like really old, sort of black
Yeah,
and white sort of thing.
yeah, 50s going into color actually. It's like a very sweet spot of British cinema history.
Ah,
Late 50s until the early or mid 70s, in fact.
wow.
Also, a lot of stuff in the 60s. Most of them are in color. Just, I mean, if you still go on YouTube, and all our listeners are welcome to try this,
Mm.
look for Peter Cushing. That's the guy who plays Grand Moff Tarkin in the original Star Wars.
Oh,
So,
whoa.
yeah, yeah. So before he landed that role, he actually had this long and illustrious career of these films, and he just has such a nice character, even though the films are kind of like silly.
Mm.
I like the naivete and basically to use an overused word, how based those films are. I really like those ones. So that's that for me. I'm not watching some extra sophisticated weird stuff. I mean, if anyone was curious, sorry to disappoint in that
Oh
respect.
no. What I'm watching right now is Breaking Bad for the first time. I'm
Oh,
finally getting on that bandwagon.
yeah. I just watched like half of the first season.
Hmm.
And I mean, we just also at the time, that's almost a decade ago now. At the time, we also had some cancer issues in the family.
Mm.
So I just like, I said, I'm already thinking about this shit in daily life. I'm not gonna like
I'm
spread
not.
my. So I never got on the bandwagon, but I hear it's pretty nice. So, enjoy watching.
Thank you. Yeah, I kind of watched a season and then I stopped for not because I didn't like it, I just kind of stopped and then
Mhm.
years and years later, here we are finally picking it back up. And then I just started recently listening to an audiobook of Jade City by Fonda Lee. That's it.
Ooh, okay. Not
And
familiar with it, but is it fiction? Is it non-fiction? How is it?
it's it's fiction. It's like an urban fantasy. Uh,
Ooh.
so kind of like it kind of feels like fictional sort of Japanese gang sort of stuff.
Oh,
But
a
it's
bit
has
like a bit like those weird fiction, like Murakami kind of stuff, or
probably I'm
slang.
unfamiliar with that, but probably
Yeah.
it's got some cool so like martial based combat stuff as well as some
Mm-hmm,
very
mm-hmm,
subtle material mineral based, in this case jade
mm-hmm,
based
mm-hmm.
sort of power magic sort of stuff. Very, very well written. Very I'm deep in the setup and I'm very much enjoying it.
Sounds like a great summer reading.
Hmm.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. I can't wait to. In a couple of days, I'm due down at the seaside, and I can't
Ooh.
wait to. Yeah, I can't wait to curl up at the beach with this old guy rambling about how bad architecture represents society's mechanical decay. Just the thing for the season.
Yeah. But that's so bringing that guy up because you mentioned he's an architect first, and
Hmm.
then it seems like that informs quite a bit of his writing,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or it has like a backbone of architecture rooted in what he does. I Is that correct to say? Would
I don't think Mumford was an architect directly. I don't think he even
mm,
like studied anything distinct. I mean, like he just was a good writer, and
mm,
like for some time in this book actually he talks a bit about like basically what he was and what he wants to become, and he identifies that as a distinct problem in American culture. Then I think it's become a problem of world culture now, basically the reduction of the individual to their vocation.
yeah.
But he's like really cranky, and I think deep down inside I'm a bit cranky too. And he said, no, I'm gonna fight, and I'm gonna become this like weird amalgam and weird alloy, not quite what anyone wants me to be, but what I want to be. But I don't know.
And you're gonna be
So I
sitting on the
think he was
beach
just,
going, yes, yes. I feel you.
yes, every between 15-minute cat naps, it's gonna be like, preach on, brother, and then maybe slip into the water, and then that's right, and then again.
But I love it just reminded me like I tend to like writing, or I have a very sweet spot for authors that seem to have a very it seems like they have a focal point in their regular life. Like, you have Tolkien who's, got this rich English background as well as like a lot
Hmm.
of skills as a linguist.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
almost like they're that first and then decide they want to write as well. And their fiction becomes some of the most fascinating fiction because it's like they have this one really strong root to reality that they just lean in
Hmm.
through. And it doesn't need to be some like, you're very informed and it really doesn't matter what it is. Like you could be a geologist. And because of
Yeah.
this amazing tether through your geological knowledge, you have this amazing root to reality that just makes your work so rich. And that was one thing that
Yes.
I loved about your work is because you have this amazing route through like evolutionary speculation
Hmm.
that just
Hmm.
makes it feels so like I'm just with you right along for the ride.
Oh,
And
oh.
I wanted to ask you like because looking through your CV it wasn't like, well, at least from the CV, like I just saw like, you have some biology classes in there.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I guess where did this deep sort of evolutionary biology lens sort of develop?
Well, I think part of it was like always in me. I always liked seeing strange creatures,
Mm,
but then, I mean, the thanks here must go to my family that, mm, I mean, I was born in Turkey, and they were very careful that I got a quote unquote international education, which entailed sending me to basically, imagine they teleport to the regular K-12 high school from the United States to the suburbs of Istanbul.
Mm-hmm.
And this high school, aside from all those great teachers, also had a complete K-12 American library. And
Ah.
I can't tell you how much, like, then I went to study at Cornell University, but I would dare say that that library had a greater impact on me than the Ivy League school, because I was still set straight when I was there. But it had books like Incredible Life by Conway Morris and The Fossils of the Burgess Shale. That's the fossils of the Cambrian explosion, when all
Mm-hmm.
those weird creatures first evolved. And they were all in their original English language. So I was a bit of a recluse during elementary school and high school years. So I was just holed up in this K-12 library reading these books. When I was not doing that, I was actually out in the school had a big backyard that basically extended into this kind of nondescript suburban prairie. And I was just out there catching reptiles and lizards. Then I was just either indoor, just reading about these stuff. And so I got an early start. And I always I was interested in strange creatures, but if it hadn't been for that education, maybe I would have remained a purely fantasist, or have remained confined to the realm of dragons and shit. And but then I began to learn about these patterns in life. And then when time came to go to college, I was accepted from Cornell University. I was planning to do a dual major there, zoology and filmmaking.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got the technical foundations alongside the philosophical, basically discussions around this. I mean, but then I realized also reading is quite fun too. And I think I was blessed with a good memory, so I could take things from a certain thing and adapt it to another thing. But as I read and read, I realized that this sort of weird gap developed along my reading habits, let me say that much.
Yeah.
So I either focused on extremely technical real stuff, like fossils from a certain formation, or I'm just looking beetles of the world, carnivores of the world, magic in the Malay Peninsula, stuff like this. So
Oh, yeah.
first source real stuff.
Love it.
Or straight up nonfiction. That is to say, memoirs of a Turkish customs inspector, something like that.
Love that.
Those things are fine too. Or I gravitated towards I said, this is my humble and personal perspective. I said, if I was gonna read fiction, just read science fiction and go all the way. Because I always realized when I read there's great fiction out there too, but when I read let's just say okay fiction writing, I realized how dry and cardboard it felt compared to real life memoirs I'd also been reading on the sites.
Yeah.
So this kind of foundation developed with let us say 2.5 very widely spread legs. One on wild science fiction, one in basically reference books. Let me just say that much, and one in on memoirs. And based on that, I began to I said, okay, I can do something like that, and I just began doing what I did, and here we are.
It's a very your K-12 experience sounds very romantic in retrospect.
Yes. I mean, Turkish schools, say what you will about them, but I think there's less bullying than in American schools. I don't know though. I don't know. But I think I'm convinced that college is a kind of college is a time when the stones fall into place. But I think the few years before that is when the stones are crafted, in my humble opinion.
And then it's making sure the students feel free enough to craft whatever stones they feel called to and aren't feeling, because social pressures are so big at that age. And you're so susceptible to peer pressures. so many
Oh
people
yeah.
can miss out on things they love just because they're scared of loving them or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think that family and social conditions play a role there too. I mean,
Absolutely.
I was very lucky, and I mean, there are families like I was a weird kid, and there are families like if their son or daughter is a little bit weird, they're like they like do their damnedest best to kind of like iron that personality back,
Hmm.
and I think that's just an unfortunate part of life. And I'm not even beginning to cover the lack of circumstance. I mean, I look at people I meet in life, and I see like many people who could have been like me or even better than me, who could have been like my favorite authors or artists.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
just because of lack of social opportunities or economic opportunities, I think it's kind of hard to like not fall into that cliqueiness and like the whole like pack dwelling monkey human game. If things
Hmm.
are bad at home, if you're starving at home, like you fall into that because you got no choice.
Hmm.
So I always knock on wood. I don't know. That's
I'll knock on wood too. And then you did actually didn't check the dates on these, but all tomorrows did come before all yesterdays, ironically.
Yes, all tomorrows came before almost everything. And
Ah, okay.
until it became this, like I first started writing and illustrating it in high school. Then
Oh my
when I
gosh.
went to, yeah, yeah, when I went to university, I kind of like, I had a lot of spare time and I just basically like finished writing it and just released it. I never thought it would have been like this well known or this well received
Mm.
because teenage angst kind of phase of my life. And well, maybe I don't know, I must have done something right. So now, thanks to this newfound celebrity that that book has,
Mm.
I'm actually rewriting and re-illustrating it.
Oh, whoa.
So there. Yeah, yeah. I mean,
That's
I need
very
to.
exciting. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah. There are many things about the old book that I just flat out didn't like and
Mm.
like didn't like. But it's got its charms too. I don't know. So I don't know. From this point on, you ask and I answer because.
That's so I didn't realize it was illustrated by you until after I'd listened to it.
Mm,
Because there are so many illustrations, I just assumed, oh, this is for sure someone like whoever's
mm,
reading this or like putting somebody's adding images to this after the fact. So I actually, when I was
ooh.
listening to it, didn't want to look at the images because I just assumed it was some compilation someone did on YouTube, and I was like, oh, I don't want to see, I don't want to see because I want to imagine the things as I hear it. And then afterwards, I was like, oh, illustrated by CM Kosemen, Tom, like also. And then I was like, oh, now I have to listen again and look at the creatures because they
Yeah.
are how he imagined them.
Yeah, I mean, the whole project actually started life as an art project because basically I was drawing these like weird post-human creatures without any context of a story behind them. And then I realized, well, you know, let me write something around those things. So I came up with the story of these like galactic invaders because with some of those forms, there's no way like if people keep on building if people persist with their mechanical civilization, there's
Hmm.
no way you're gonna like turn into an underground creature. Like you'd
Yeah,
sooner go extinct.
you won't find the external influence to get us there,
Y-
really.
Yeah, so I came up with this plot device of this like galactic invader species. It was just like literally a plot device. But then many people liked them, took a life of its own. So I don't know, must have been something right there. And I just like put everything together. And it was the years of DeviantArt in 2005 or 2006. And I just threw everything into a Google Drive and I just said, hey, there's this book, download it if you want. And at first, there was like a bunch of maybe, I don't know, 20 to 40 people who really liked this and
Mm.
popularized it. And it remained that way for like practically until 2017, 18.
Hmm.
I think many of the readers for this book come from America, and I think it accelerated like the American discovery of this book accelerated with two things.
Mm.
One, as a generation more versed in like evolutionary natural history stuff,
Yeah.
grew up and matured. And number two, I think basically what happened in the States after 2016, and it kind of accelerated in the last 3 4 years, kind of like created this kind of like, oh, the world is ending atmosphere among American readers, most of it. So I think that whole theme of catastrophe resonated in a way.
Yeah, I feel that. It feels very zeitgeisty at the moment.
Yeah. But I think it was the COVID pandemic that really gave it like the kick in the engine. And then, ooh, and I think the generation who was born after the year 2000, they really picked this up because, like, when I was writing this book, it sounds like, for example, right now we talk about multiverses or like the
Yeah.
reality being a simulation and stuff like that. I mean, times were in until the mid 2000s, mid double O's, many people could not understand these themes. You have to realize, like, it took a film like The Matrix for the concept of a simulated reality to became a kind of commonplace, referable idea in society at large. Back before that, you could say, "Oh, so it's a dream." Like many people didn't get this. Same with the whole parallel universe or multiverse effect.
Mm.
Like, I mean, I remember like really like debate fighting with people in order for them to understand because the idea of time being a circle, like if you
Mm.
change something, then your mom would die and you wouldn't exist. But you really couldn't get across the point that no, actually, time could split. How do you split time? Like a branch. No, it has to be a loop. And you have to realize many people, like, I'm not blaming, I'm not calling anyone stupid or nothing, but like these ideas, like, really took a lot of hammering from popular culture to like
Mm.
seep into people's minds.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's everyone's like, oh, you're the best simulated reality that happened to me and stuff. Like it's become like well understood. Same with all tomorrows, that the notion people could evolve, or the notion even that the people had evolved, or you could take such niches,
Mm.
it wasn't really something that many people could accept for better or worse until like maybe 10 years ago, actually.
I mean, imagine like I just imagine it because you take it to quite a few extremes. Some like very visceral and vaguely uncomfortable places, which it has that we're all human listening to
Hmm.
it, so we have this innate anchor to it. It's like, whoa, so
Hmm.
you did what to the human form? But I was just thinking, like, if you wrote this like a few hundred years ago, you may have been killed for this work.
Oh,
or, or
maybe.
yeah,
Maybe
it's a
not in my
compliment.
part of the world, but in
Ah,
Europe,
yeah,
or yeah, I don't know.
Europe.
Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, back in those days, I think, the whole debate about this early new atheism days, this sort of misplaced conviction that the internet would render religion obsolete,
Mm.
and as just we only need to breed these creationists and make everyone understand evolution, and boom, everybody's problems will be solved. There was a sort of naive phase in the early days of the internet. I think some of that has seeped in now that you prompted this train of thought. But for me, always, I mean, I knew people had evolved,
Hmm.
but for me, I don't know, I never had that kind of like mm, messianic zeal about making everyone understand evolution. But certainly some points in all tomorrows, such as that, like, I mean, when people think evolution, still to this day, they think like, oh, if it's more evolved, it must be smarter. There's this
Yeah.
horrible film with Scarlett Johansson in it, like she becomes evolved and advanced so she can use more of her brain and has sonar and like can
Ah,
think
yeah.
faster than computer. So that's like a kind of like false view of evolution. But evolution is just the best luck of the best adapted. So in this book, I try to show circumstances where like humans could quote unquote be reduced to the level of animals, but at least life would go on. So there was a bit of that intent behind my works too.
The notion of like, oh, evolution is forward and evolution means more brain capacity, and even the idea of forward, it's like, well, what's forward? But
Mm,
like higher brain capacity, higher
mm,
whatever abilities like
mm.
that, that's based on our current idea of what we like about our current form. And it's like these are
Mm-hmm.
advantages that we've found in ourselves. So it's natural for us to want those to be the points that evolve further. But we don't
Yeah,
necessarily get a say in that. And it's so it can go any
no,
direction.
no. Yeah. I think like also because these are all like quote unquote cerebral subjects, there's always the kind of tendency to equate like further evolution with like bigger brain, like big brain
Mm-hmm.
guys, like
Yeah.
almost like so. But that actually is not the case, and like in this idea, actually, you sometimes see the people who claim to be smarter are actually like flat out turn out to be weird racists or sexists at the end.
Yeah.
So it's a hairy business. And I just wanted to like also it comes from like reading about the Cambrian explosion in high school. So just like a quick intro
Yeah,
in
please.
when multi-celled animals first evolved. You got to understand like for like life kind of evolved and then for like nearly a billion years it was just like bacteria or some very simple worms, and then in like the last 600 million years suddenly there was an explosion of forms, kind of like worms, mollusks, and ancestors of the earliest fish and like arthropods and stuff like that. But when this explosion first occurred, there were lots of very strange forms that quite didn't get anywhere. Very famous example is Opabinia with 5 eyes and a weird like vacuum cleaner mouth. So these were thought to be like creatures with left no descendants and were like these kind of monstrous early examples. We kind of now know that they actually also had a pattern in themselves, but they had body plans that were never quite repeated afterwards. So like imagine like a kind of like a swimming fish-like thing with multiple fins, but the front part is an insect, but it has 5 eyes,
Wow.
and the mouth is like a kind of gas mask with a kind of claw on top of it. But that's not the
Oh my
real mouth.
gosh.
It's just the thing that grasps the food and tucks it into the real mouth, which is just below the 5 eyes. So like lots of weird creatures like that. The implication was that if the dice was rolled again, maybe evolution could have went along a different path and we could have been living in the sort of 5-eyed snappy mouth universe, and then things like vertebrates could have been an afterthought. So like when you study those things, there's a bit more to that, but like suffice it to say, for a surface level discussion, when you study those things, it becomes apparent that it could have gone either way, and we are speaking from the bottom of the cone of events, let us just say.
Yeah.
But that's actually really refreshing because it just means that there's no like there's no great success or great failure in the greater scheme of things. But I mean, from this I got a sort of que sera, whatever will be will be. Tomorrow's not ours to see. And I
Yeah,
found that kind of comforting. I
it
know.
is.
I hope I could keep the train of thought congruent here, but so that's the sense I got from studying evolution, and that's the kind of sense I wanted to put into All Tomorrows as like teen angsty and like in some parts cringely written as it sounds. I still like that.
I didn't find any part of it cringy, to be honest. I didn't
Ah,
so
thank you.
yeah. The
Uh,
I love that like being on the bottom of the evolutionary cone, because it's so we have the tendency to whatever's around us becomes our normal. So it's like, oh,
mm,
we're human, we're, apex predators sort of thing, and we're it's very easy to see or just kind of take the notion that it's like, oh, we were inevitable. Like we were where evolution was pointing. It's like, no, we're where evolution ended up. And it's like such a,
Yeah, I
you capture
agree.
that very well.
I agree. And I think like another little thing that helped was like in the last 20 years, a lot of really smart, really talented people grew up, uh, trained by, like, helped along by the internet and the possibilities it entails. And I think just reading, like, there's this whole sort of Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message kind of thing, that when you read stuff online, you get better used to the possibility of multiple possibilities.
Mm,
Whereas in the old pre-internet world, it was just books and like a one-way line of information communication.
true.
And I think it kind of like necessitated a certain linear understanding of the world, which wasn't bad, but it was what it was.
Yeah.
I think in the ensuing generations, uh, humanity's entire way of dealing with information traded persistence for an appreciation of broader possibilities.
Mm.
So there.
I like that outlook on it. Like, I've had a sort of nihilism around how information travels around today because it just, to me, has felt like there's been so much noise.
Yeah.
And a part of digesting information these days is being able to filter through the noise and kind of find what you want to actually digest. Um, so I like how you put it. It's like we're trading a more linear path for, I don't know, more broader possibilities. It's a bit more temporal, and we're a bit I guess, yeah, it's almost like maybe that's a good thing. Like the mind, we're not just reading something and taking it as fact immediately. It's like it kind of swims in the mind a little bit. And it's like, well, let's see. And we do some, I guess, larger pattern connecting from that place if we're going to
Yeah.
then pull more sources before we make conclusions. That's a good
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. And I think like aside from some very broad conclusions, the whole issue becomes not arriving at conclusions, except
Mm,
for some certain very broad and simple issues, but it basically becomes the whole aesthetics of running and managing a train of thought, and like how good you cultivate your garden of ideas.
mm. Oh,
So
that's beautiful.
yeah. So less of maybe that debate bro thing, where and more of like being able to say, but then there was this guy who once said this, huh? And that's interesting. Or like, I don't know, but it's we should look into this. Like, I think these two things, like that's interesting and I don't know. I think those are like the coolest, ballsiest things anyone interested in any line of thought can say.
True. The I do, so I have a few more questions about
Please,
all
please.
tomorrows, and then I want to branch into some other stuff. But when I was hearing it, I'm not sure if this was intentional or not, but as humanity started to get spread into kind
Hmm.
of the more even just more distant life forms and spread so in, like unrecognizably,
Hmm.
I started to see like, oh, it's kind of becoming kind of circular at this point because like we share ancestry with a lot of like with trees, even like way distant ancestors and stuff like that, and our
Hmm.
DNA is similar. So I started thinking like, well, I mean, who's to say, we have this distant strand of DNA connecting us, like we can call that human DNA, and these are other forms of human, I guess, if you want. It's, I mean,
Hmm.
misleading based on speciation and stuff like that. But I started to kind of see that pattern as species started to spread out further in all tomorrows, where it's like, well, this is almost essentially what's going on with us. It just depends on how you define humans. Like, could the humans in your book even mate with each other and create offspring? I don't know, probably not, but like it depends on sort of those definitions. And I wanted to kind of see if that was that an intentional thing to kind of create this sensation of circularity.
A bit. I mean, back then, one of the biggest critiques I had a problem with was this sort of false accusation that evolution made people selfish, and made people Darwinian and like, oh, if it's only science, we can be as cruel as we want. And this was a misplaced critique coming from these creationist or religious conservative spheres of the internet. But then you realize, actually, if you understand your evolution, you recognize a kinship of life, stretching, as you said, to trees and back, and probably into the distant future as well. So there's no reason why you can't use that understanding to be more compassionate and like more thankful, and uh, arrive at sort of more uplifting, heartfelt thoughts that people also arrive through the love of God,
Mm.
which I have no problem with. But I just wanted to show that, you know, I mean, it's kind of going to sound hippie-ish, but we are all
Bring it
interlinked,
on.
and we are all a big family of feuding, fighting, coexisting creatures. And I mean, philosophically, I think the quote unquote evil caveat there comes from this sort of early Enlightenment belief that only humans could know, therefore we can only have subjective experiences, and animals are like organic machines, whereas
Hmm.
that's certainly not true. People have, look, people have homologous bones, you know, the bones in my hand extend into the wings of a bat or the
Hmm.
fins of a dolphin. So the same thing with feelings and sentiments, and I clearly see no objection to why animals or even like simple organisms could not have the same self-awareness or feelings that we have. So I just wanted to get that across, to be honest.
Mm. This other question. So my brother was the one that initially sent this story through to me. He was like, "You got to listen to this," and I was like, "Okay." Um,
Mhm.
and so I asked him if he had any questions, and he wanted to know. I don't know if you have an answer to this, but do you have an idea of what the music to the Snake People sounded like?
Oh, yes, yes. I don't know. Like, I always thought, okay, I'm just going to quote the letters now.
Hmm.
They should look at this obscure Ottoman song called the Nikriz Longa, which is Nikrizlonga, the Nikriz Longa, which goes like la 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 na 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 na, sort of more undulating, sinuous melodies.
Okay,
Maybe a bit like that. But of course, these in the book, the snake people don't have external ears, so it has to like come from ground vibration. So take that
true.
and adapt it into that,
Yeah.
and maybe you get a sense. With the snake people also a formative memory, and I'm revealing this to your listeners for the first time. A
Oh,
formative memory was basically in our house there was a laundry room, but this was like a long, narrow room, okay? And the dryer was there. So I could like in cold winter days, I lined the entire room with bed sheets and crawled in next to the dryer, which was like
yeah.
and like blasting this pleasant stream of hot air. And I don't know, it just makes this mechanical white noise, which was just ooh. I mean,
That sounds wonderful, honestly.
so I like hid there, you know. Also, there's the added sense that basically your parents are taking care of you and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So that's like really cozy. So that's how I imagine the snake people would be like, you know, like very small but cozy like dwellings.
Yeah.
And sometimes maybe the entire structure has this kind of like vibrating machine melody from the basement up. But you know,
Ah,
every tenant is feeling that and vibing. So maybe that could be some of the sentiment behind it. But thanks to your brother for this awesome question.
yeah. That's great. That sounds like a very soothing society. Just a hum that's kind of pumped through the city for everyone to kind of mellow out
Yeah,
to.
yeah, exactly. I mean, with little details like that, you really flesh out the characters. Even though the
Mm,
book is very short and it's just one creature and like, but if you just drop one hint about them having music or like, I don't know, them liking to dance or something, it
mm-hmm.
really sticks with people, I think.
It
So
really does.
yeah, so I'm happy I got to do that. Yeah.
I was actually, now that you say that, was that because it did actually feel the human form that kind of adopted the most human nature, I guess at least
Mhm.
the more romantic side of human nature, did feel to be the snake people when I was going through. It's like we sort of learned about they had hopes, they had dreams, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Was that kind of more because you had this sort of very intimate tie to this particular form?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, maybe it takes the labors of a psychiatrist or something, but it could be.
Sure.
I mean, I always like snakes and reptiles as, and I remember like for part of the time I was writing this book, I also kept a grass snake as a temporary pet.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe it filters. I
Yeah.
like those animals. I mean, like there's this one book about basically reptile photography, and it's by a French author,
Mm.
and it basically says that a reptile pet will not reciprocate like a cat or a dog, and it will not look at you, it will not sing to you, but know that it will happy to be there if you take good care of it. So I think that kind of stuck with me too.
Oh,
So I don't know. That's like really cute.
that's very cute. It's
Yeah.
like, I don't know, I'm just kind of happy to be here. We're all here. Happy to,
Yeah. I mean, be next to me, but don't get in my face, and we'll be fine.
yeah,
I
don't
think,
touch me, but I'm good.
yeah. I think like as an adolescent too, I must have felt a bit of that because I was like a bit introverted.
Mm,
Still am, but in a
mm,
strange, other, different way, I think.
I share that. And because you mentioned the Q being
Hmm.
like, or the external force that's causing the initial like
Hmm.
massive branching, kind of like a Cambrian explosion from a different angle.
Yeah.
Uh, the You mentioned that being a plot device, and it's like you don't need it to be anything more than a plot device because it is you just need something to kick off an explosion, and then the it's a plot kick, and then from there
Yeah.
you can explore the heart of the book, which is these species, and you do start to
Hmm.
set up like a very there's an abstract plot weaving behind the back of it, this sort of it starts to come together at the end a little bit. It's almost like well, it's really just perseverance of, I guess, human species, or it's like they start forming a bit of an alliance at the end. I don't even know
Hmm.
what I would call it, but there's you're rooting for these species, and you're kind of
Yeah.
wanting them to find some sort of ground at the end, and they, I won't say what happens, but like I don't know. I don't really have a question off this. I just kind of wanted to say because you're talking about these intimate points that anchor people down through these species and stuff, and it's like,
Hmm.
and then you mentioned, and then you have a very broad stroke, which is the cue, and
Hmm.
like, they're tools in a toolbox of a writer for a reason. It's like, well, you don't need the cue to be anything else because you just need a plot kick and something
Yeah.
like
Back then, that was the case. Now, unfortunately, because of this rewrite and my pedantism,
that.
they are gonna be like something, and there's gonna be
Ah,
something slightly of a reveal at the end about the Q, which I now call the Kuhanim, which kind of sounds cooler with
it
multiple
does.
syllables.
Love a
And
few syllables.
yeah. So just stay tuned for that. But if your listeners follow me on patreon.com, sometimes I drop little nuggets and hints here and there.
Nice.
By the way, actually, for your listeners only, I have a small excerpt I could read for.
Please.
Okay, so in this new book, now it's much more like multifaceted and like multi-angled. So now there will be multiple post-human species that don't descend from people, but from the creatures they brought along to terraform their planets before the arrival of the Kuhanim.
Mm,
So there will be lots of worlds in which humans are extinct, but weird life forms brought over from Earth and that have sometimes somehow endured the reign of the Q have prospered.
Mm.
So now I'm going to give you two paragraphs from basically what happens in these worlds and about these non-human posthumans. And
Awesome.
I could say, let's start reading now. Now behold those descendants of humanity who were not humans themselves. In those worlds where humanity had died out, they flowered into rich profusion, establishing thriving ecosystems populated by vast new arrays of species and clades. Mere fish and insects, cattle and fowl, arachnids and reptiles diversified into such outlandish forms and swapped roles in such profanity that an observer from the past would hardly recognize them as earthly life. There were worlds in which flies grew to the size of dragons or remained as larvae and thrashed across the waves as leviathans, where fish grew wings and flew, where birds established semi-sessile eusocial colonies and battled with proboscis-bearing hordes of flying reptiles. 1,000 worlds where regressed birds or advanced reptiles once again established infinite reigns of newfangled archosaurs, worlds where spiders grew into crystalline, wind-threading angels, worlds where the last mammals shrank to the size of pits and sought refuge from successive waves of land-invading Selachians, worlds where thundering land mollusks ran along lands of photosynthetic fungi, projectile vomiting lava darts into one another, relentless orgasms of speciation and diversity. So there's just
Woo!
yeah, for your listeners only.
So I love with how like you pull it in so many like directions, it becomes humorous in a way, and I love that sense of humor, like where it's just like we're just gonna pervert this thing to the end, but through that perversion it becomes beautiful again, and it's just like it has such a sense of humor to me.
All right, all right. Yes, yes. I mean, that's something I'm trying to do, and I think it also sounds like weirder in my accented delivery. So yeah.
No, thank you very much. That's awesome. I love I'm a big spider fan, so to hear
Oh,
what happens with
those
the
things are
arachnids a
great.
bit, they're
Yeah,
incredible.
yeah. They're like I think little cats, especially if you look at jumping spiders.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I mean, if you finish the game as a jumping spider, you get reincarnated as a cat.
They one time I had a jumping spider on my hand, and it was
Mm-hmm.
just like jumping from finger to finger, and then I'd put
Mm-hmm.
my next hand on and it would continue jumping along the fingers, and it was the first time I'd held a jumping spider, and it
Mm-hmm.
felt like a little pet.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
also they're so advanced visually, like we have that I feel like we connect very well with other animals that are visual as well because we're so visual, so we have this like through line
Yes.
between us, and to have that an arachnid that when you approach it, it looks up at you because it's picking up on you visually. Like to have that connection, it's like, whoa, we see each
Yeah.
other.
They do the whole like body shift and stare thing, which is really
Hmm.
cute and
It's so
endearing.
cute. The old body shift and stare. So off of this, we will branch a bit because you have some other projects. So you have the All Yesterday's project, which I read a bit of that book as well, and it feels, and I'm not sure if this is the nature of just what it is, but it feels more maybe it's just because my instinct is to say it's more academical. It's more like rooted in reality, I want to say. But in when I really think back on it, I would say it's
Hmm.
equally as speculative as All Tomorrows. It's just we have fossil records to work off of, but it's still um delving into unknown and asking questions like what if it was like
Hmm.
this, what if it was like this, it could just as easily be like this because there's so much room for speculation even looking back. um
Hmm.
I guess what would you say? I don't even know what the question is off of that. I just kind of I just had
Well,
that
I
thought.
mean, let me broach into all
Yeah.
yesterdays as well. It was actually like my first quote unquote serious book, which
Mm.
was like published and like people could buy from Amazon and like I could get money for in return.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote this with my close friend John Conway.
Mm.
And later on, we also brought Darren Naish aboard for writing the introduction, and he also like picked up the flag, bless his soul. He then moved on to like bigger projects like the Apple TV dinosaur prehistoric planet thing. So the three of us collaborated for this thing. I wrote most of the text actually. And together with John Conway, I produced half of the illustrations. It was a kind of like basically the unrestrained fire I had in All Tomorrows. It's still in there a bit. Certainly my ideas about evolution still continue to resonate. I mean, some of our like understandings about natural history were things like not everything has to serve a purpose. Sometimes, for example, animals play, or sometimes, organisms aren't really machines in the sense that not every body part has one function only. But if you look in nature, it's actually extremely rare to see one body part or one adaptation or one behavior with a single function only. So basically, we kind of wanted to do that, but of course, this is the realm of science. So like I had to go back a lot and like put a lot of like girders in place and like write in a slightly more pedantic way. And also think about the audience too, that like, so I wanted to write this book for basically anyone interested in dinosaurs. But if they were like the OG, like really into dinosaurs crowd, they should also be able to like look into the references and like dig deeper about like source materials and stuff like that. And so that's the kind of writing I wanted to do. And that was done basically. One of the, I think, key elements of writing a good dinosaur book, even if you're writing for kids, is not to belittle your readers. These days, there are a lot of books out there, dinosaur books out there, for like, I hate to use this word, but for like normie parents who think their kids are into dinosaurs only because they're like, rah, screaming.
Yeah.
Whereas like, I think you felt this too. As a kid, you could tell when people are bullshitting. Come on.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want a book like that, go read Where the Wild Things Are. When a kid wants to read about dinosaurs, he or she, even when they're like very young and like silly, they know how to tell apart a good, well done, well illustrated, academically rigorous dinosaur book. Like you just know in your heart, like when something is good. So in the case of All Yesterdays, even when the book was kind of a easy reading book, I just wanted to like pack the foundations with like good science and good references. And so did John Conway, I think. Like he's like a genius of an artist. Like he's one of those artists that I really look up to. His illustrations are extremely lifelike, are very well done. And so it was a nice group effort. One of the nicer parts in that book, of course, is the All Today's section, in which we commit willingly the errors we see in commonplace dinosaur art.
I thought that was so great.
Yeah. So like every creature is a monster, things are drawn as like basic skeletons almost. So
yeah. Actually, do you really want to quickly give a quick overview of what Paleoart is and what the objective of this practice is?
Of course. Paleoart is the practice of trying to draw and imagine creatures from the past. And basically, Jurassic Park could be considered a medium of Paleoart. Basically, with Paleoart, you realize, you look at the skeletons of these animals. Like once you look into the kitchen of how dinosaur art is made, you look at the skeletons of these creatures, and then you look at the skeletons of creatures living today. And even if they're like the scaliest, like most monstrous reptiles, you seldom see every bone. Like if you look at the skeleton of an alligator, okay, the alligator has the teeth showing, but aside from that, its body is actually quite hefty and chunky. There's lots of like meat in the tail.
Yeah.
That's actually what you eat when you eat Cajun alligator, which is, I think, great food, by the way. Fried alligator tail. Oh, anyways, so like lots of animals have these things. Considering now that dinosaurs are closely related to birds, you also get to think about things like plumage or scale,
Mm,
or even like things like wattles on the face, you know. If you look at lots of bird skulls, they're just bird skull. But
yeah.
if you just look at their like, especially in the cases of like ducks or pheasants, they have like these crazy colors and like fleshy things on their head. So even if you skip aside the feathers, or if you're like, for some weird reason, don't want to give them feathers, it's clear that these animals were like far more visually ornamented than what we give them credit for. And there's this, with some of these ornaments or details, there's just no way to know. With certain things like the failed tail fat or the heavy, chunky tails, okay, you have to like, we know it was there, but it's just not drawn in there. In a
Hmm.
lot of old dinosaur books, the artists draw only from the skeletons. So
Mm.
the back part of the dinosaur looks like it has got some weird thing like a cod piece sticking out.
Ah, yeah.
And that's just not the case with any creature.
Yeah.
So you can like bet your ass, pun intended, that they had some ass. So that's the known unknown. Then you got unknown unknowns with things like, I mean, there are all these like weird predatory dinosaurs with strange crests or horns, and it's clear to see that they carried some sort of visual signal, but it's just forever lost to time. How do we know? So in those areas, imagination comes into play. And I think in those weird cases, you can actually be more realistic if you're more fantastic. Now, I'm not saying like give the
Love
creature
it.
dragon wings or like, I don't know, a 10-foot balloon on its head. But if you look at the behavior of reptiles and birds or even mammals, like any animal that's alive today, okay? Things like the antlers of a deer and the way they shed the skin from them in the so who knows? Maybe, I mean, like, not the same thing, but similar weird things may have happened. You just know
Almost
don't know.
certainly. Yeah. Like,
And
because life is so complex. I mean, look at the Cambrian explosion and like all these things. Like, these are things that would
n-
come
n-
from this. So it's like, it's going to have a plethora of complexity that we can only speculate, and we can
yeah,
be
yeah.
fantastical in that speculation.
And these lost details are frustratingly the main deal of these animals. Like, how do you know a tiger? By its pelt. If it if you just knew tigers from fossils, you would never get the sense of that pattern. How do you know a parrot? Because of its vocal mimicry. Well, if you only knew the skulls of parrots, you would think maybe they're like some nut cracking, boring creature. But you would never know these abilities to. So, like, the salient characteristics of animals don't fossilize. And for that, I think we could go out on a limb. But in the book, we kind of play it safe and call this like willing speculation or like thoughtful speculation or something. So
Yeah.
I don't know, it really resonated well with people and lots of people liked all yesterday's. So that was good, I think.
Yeah. And is it, because it seems to be, it is quite prevalent in like Paleoart communities and things like that. What are the primary, is it primarily bought by individual consumers, or are universities buying it, or what are the,
I think all yesterday's, aside from all tomorrow's, has been like the most accessible book to
mm,
individuals. So a lot of people have bought it and are buying it. I think like we're pretty spread thin, but everyone who's dabbled in paleo art has gotten this book in ebook format
mm-hmm.
or maybe pirated it. I don't know, but I think lots of people get this, and I mean, still pay some of my bills even 10 days after it was 10 years after it was released. So
Hey,
that's good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for anyone at home, if you want a good, poignant example of the extents to which we could take paleo art, it is a good idea to see your rendition of a swan, how we might interpret a swan based on
Oh,
just the fossil records. That one stuck with me because I was like, I mean, so many birds would look like they had these raptory, pointy arms and stuff like that because we couldn't imagine the plumage and just stuff
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. It's a very good example.
I mean, I one of my like favorite. Sometimes people ask like, how to improve in Paleoart, and I say like, go to these websites and look at these X-rays of animals, and you just see how little the bones alone preserve. They also preserve a lot, but like you first gotta realize that how much goes unrepresented. Then go back to dinosaur skeletons with the same attitude and try to flesh them out that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, also there's something about dinosaur skeletons that, like in the museums, the skeletons are the centerpiece, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you look at those things and you say, that's like, I mean, if the skeleton itself was moving, you would believe it was a monster like that. So
Mm,
you kind of have to like realize what goes over a skeleton. And then if you
mm-hmm.
start drawing that way, I think you're on right track. And for the record, let me say that this book has inspired artists whose skill far surpasses mine, and I'm just so happy and proud to have.
No, that's so you mentioned in I believe you talk about it in your book. You talk about it in a TED talk you did a few years
Mhm.
back. I watched that. You
In
mentioned that a lot
Spain,
of
actually, where you are
oh,
now.
that's
It
right.
was in Madrid. Yeah.
Yeah. But you mentioned previous a lot of like the iconic images that we kind of accept as this must be what it looks like now because it's just become they're popularized images. So they're
Mhm.
taken as the normal set slash taken as fact. You said a lot of those images came from people that um, did a lot of sort of biblical representations, or they're very
Mhm.
or like representations of the flood and things like that. Um,
Yes, the earliest paleo art was like
yeah,
that.
very early, and then that sort of informed future paleo art because we're basing it off of these very early images. And then it
Yeah.
feels like relatively recently that we're starting to it was actually around I know like even between Jurassic Park 1 and Jurassic Park 3 you start to see differences in how we're representing dinosaurs
Mhm.
because they started to find evidence of like feathers on things.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like so relatively recently we really started to get very creative with how we represent these dinosaurs and extinct mammals as well.
Yeah.
What do you have any, I guess, wish for where paleo art goes, or do you have any idea of what you would like to see happen?
Mhm,
Or
mhm,
yeah.
mhm. Okay, so that's a very nice question, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
So the the earliest kind of visions of dinosaurs really were informed by this like pre-Adamic flood representations.
Mm,
And there's this whole like semantic trope about dinosaurs being representations of a uh, obsolete world of violence.
mm,
So, but there's also something about dinosaurs themselves, like especially if you look at the kind of post 1950s, mostly American representations of dinosaurs. They're almost like action figures without copyrights.
yeah,
So, like, you got the horned one with the headbutt action, you got the biting one with the bite action, you got the long one with the long neck, you got the spiky tail one with the spiky tail action.
yeah.
So the animals themselves also like land themselves because they're like so outlandish. But to summarize the long story, I would like to see personally two things. One would be a more mannerist depiction of extinct animals. That is to say, maybe in some cases we need to also, this is informed by my other side hustle as a surreal painter. In some cases we need to abandon the even the thing about visual accuracy altogether and try just look at the fossils directly and paint something like cave art, you would see, because like if you look at those depictions of bisons and mammoths in cave art, I think they're like, not only they are our species oldest artistic heritage, they're also like surprisingly well done. they really like identify the animal, but they're not anatomically pedantic. I
Yeah.
mean, their features are kind of exaggerated and kind of like, I mean, the closest word I can find to this is manneristic, you know? And in saying this, I make a very important caveat. So it's not like drawing dinosaurs in the style of Van Gogh, you know, because that's also like AI art stuff, like, you know, T-Rex rendered in Art Nouveau style or something.
Mm.
But you just like look at this fossil directly and try to express its like salient thingness with maybe just raw colors and shades. That's something I like to try and
Mm.
experiment on. And it's very hard to do this without coming across as a kind of like uh, triceratops in the style of Van Gogh kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, I think my friend John Conway is like breaking new ground in that thing. So he has like some
Ah,
really nice, yeah, he has some really nice impressionistic takes on dinosaurs without being like pastiche about it. So like he has pieces about like a duck-billed dinosaur, but it's just like a very faint collection of spots. And if you squint, you think maybe you
yeah.
can see the animal. So
Ah, I love that.
that's the whole like that's the closest you can get by looking at fossils. So that's the whole trick there too. Another side alley is I think computer-driven digital arts, especially animation and related fields.
Mm-hmm.
And there are these like some new talented artists who are just gonna like bury people like me and John Conway alive. They're just so amazingly skilled. I mean, they do these 3D models of these creatures that really look like photographs, but they also look like real lived-in animals. You know, like their feathers are ruffled. They're dusty. They're kind of like
Ah,
silly looking sometimes.
so good.
And I'm really curious to see what comes out of that whole like digital 3D representation of creatures too, because it's something technically I'm completely unable to do. And like even 10 years ago, it would have needed something like the budget of Industrial Light and Magic, you know, like the budget of a big studio to realize.
Yep,
But now somebody can do it from their laptop. And I just find that very exciting.
it is. As well as like well yeah, like you said, the budgets, like in general, people are just having more and more access to more impressive tools just as we're refining our art of
Exactly.
making technology. So as a result, the sample size is larger of minds that we're plucking,
Mm, mm,
which is
mm, mm,
great.
mm. I'm actually going to drop a name for your listeners. Just need to search
Yeah.
for one second. This Polish Polish artist Joanna, that's Joanna Kobierska, Kobierska. I mean, if you look at her creations, it's a whole other ball game. Whole other ball game. I like stand in awe in front of her works.
Uh
Really, really nice stuff.
and for anyone listening at home, if you're thinking like, this speculative take on representing dinosaurs, if it feels sacrilegious, the other extreme is that you fall into very hard-rutted, almost dogma if you just accept, because in the end we don't really know. Like there are so
Mm-mm.
much things that we can't say for sure aside from things we can kind of immediately layer over a skeleton. So it is just the act of constantly refreshing and asking what if and exploring the possibilities and not letting anything become too cemented.
Yeah. I'm actually sending you some images from this from Joanna Kobierska's work on the
Mm.
chat, so
Oh
like
yeah.
you can get a sense of. And I always like promoting fellow artists in these like media appearances, fellow artists, fellow authors. I think it's
Absolutely.
just a cool thing. I think one of the images just came
Ah,
through.
yeah, that is beautiful.
Yeah, yeah, it really looks like they really look like things you might see in a swamp or even scampering in the street somehow.
Yeah.
And
And are these representations of they look raptor in nature?
this is like the second one I sent you is something called a pyroraptor, which is basically a turkey-sized version of that whole family.
Mm-hmm.
And the first one is Silophysis, the early, lightly built Triassic era predator dinosaur.
Ah, okay.
So it's a kind of lighter version of, it's one of the first well-known dinosaurs, but you can see how it's like skin sags and it's kind of like the 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 feathers are kind of like messy and greasy, and it's like something you might see like a possum or a stoat, in front of your porch.
True. Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like
So
greasy down feathers almost.
yeah, yeah. So Joanna Kobierska really has this way of capturing the animalness of these animals.
Yeah, there's a lot of life in these.
I just need to get this cooler for my laptop. Just a second.
Okay, yeah.
Behold my amazing cooler.
Oh my gosh.
It's an ice box with in a pan. I just put this below my
That's
laptop.
it's clever.
Yeah, this old fella has been with me for 10 years. It's a 10-year-old laptop.
Far out.
Yeah,
That's impressive. Is it
yeah, just
a this is not an advertisement either. Is it a Mac? I find that
it's
they
a Mac,
last for a
yes.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah, they do like, and I've been like also careful about. I'm not using it for gaming, and I think gaming wears out processors and shit quite
Oh
fast.
yeah. Yeah.
But old fellas getting to his last years, and I'm just
Oh,
treating him well. Yeah,
with his bedpan
yeah,
beneath
yeah.
him. Well, really, I really just kind of wanted to touch on to so you have, all tomorrows, which is speculating future evolutionary branches of
Mm-hmm.
the human branch, all yesterdays, which is looking at fossil records. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have something, and within, like you mentioned, all today's, the concept being
Mm-hmm.
extraterrestrial paleontologists coming down and building like speculating animal species based off of um, fossil records of our present day animals.
Mm-hmm.
And then now it sounds like you're going even further with the, what is it, SNIAD project? Am I saying that right?
Oh, yes, yes. So, so yeah, thank you. I mean, SNIAD is a big, big, long-running work, and
Mm,
basically it's my version of like what if like we really got to see, and all my learnings from my studies of evolutionary history, the way I studied practical biomechanics by looking at dinosaur skeletons and animal
mm.
skeletons, and basically some flights of fancy I want to make because of course this is art. So I combined them all. This was actually, once again, SNIAD has an older version you can see for free in my website, cmkosemen.com. And it was launched in 2008. Basically, it's like a field guide to many creatures from an alien world. And I've been rebooting and relaunching SNIAD for the past 5 years now, drawing creatures. Once again, I'm just rehauling everything and rewriting everything. And like the weird thing with SNIAD is that I get to like play a little, and sometimes like for example in this world there's a lineage of like insect sized creatures, but they're actually the descendants of big bodied vertebrates.
Oh
So
yeah.
imagine like cockroaches, but they're actually like very tiny mice with no bones. So, or even flies and ants that way. So that's one nice thing about it. There are also like little things. For example, there are bird-like flying creatures, but instead of singing songs, they have these glands which kind of make this bright white paint,
Oh my
and
gosh.
they just dot all over the branches or rocks or wherever they live with patterns like that Japanese artist Yaoi Kusama. And every species has a different, like there's a dasher, there's a dotter, there's a waver. Like so, it's like you look at
Oh
the branch, oh, it's the cerulean dasher, quite common at this time of the year, or something like that.
yeah.
So there, it's just like all tomorrows. I think it's gonna take longer to finish than all tomorrows,
Mm.
but just like with all tomorrows, I want it to be the great big work of this decade of my life, basically.
With all tomorrows, you want that to be?
Yeah, with
Yeah.
Ultimaros and Snayat. So these
Oh,
two
yeah.
things, I want them to be the two great big deals of my life.
I well, I'm behind you on it.
Thank you.
I want to see it come out. Um,
Yeah.
but one of the things that I really love about this Snide project is that it once again just like pushes the bounds of it challenges normalcy, and like we
Mhm.
consider normalcy to be like this is how it is because this is how it is, like we're born
Mm.
looking at these shapes, these forms, and it's like,
Mm.
oh, there can't be a creature like, one of the creatures you have, there can't be a creature like that because creatures are like this, and it's like, well, they're
Mm.
like this because it happened to be this way. But
Oh, yes, yes.
and I love how much it challenges that about like most of your creatures have this distant relative that have this appendage or looks like an appendage coming off of their chests, and
Yeah,
in reality it's
the
more of,
second mouth. It's the like actual mouth opening straight from the chest. I
yeah,
mean,
and at first it feels so bizarre to see that on all of the creatures, but when you look at this lineage of all these creatures, it makes sense. It's like, oh, okay, well, this is their normal,
yeah.
and I love that.
Yeah, that was like a little thing I did at first, and then it kind of stuck. And I said, okay, let's make this one of the brass tacks of the project.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the animals on Snayat have this like basically the mouth comes out straight from their chest, and the head is actually quite small. There's only the eyes and some other sensors. And there's a beak sometimes, but the beak actually conceals genitals. So, like when they actually mate, it looks very innocuous. It looks like two things kissing.
Yeah.
And this is actually not so far off from real life. If
Mm.
you look at slugs, their genitals are hidden away in their necks, and that thing comes out. It's as long as the slug's body, and they have this like really weird looking mating dance. So I just took something like that and applied it to something that's as large bodied as a vertebrate animal, and I kind of ran with it. And but then as you play this game and you stick to the rules, there are like caveats and secondary rules. For example, some predatory animals, these like little beaks that cover their genitals in their mouths, actually use that like the claws of a crab to kill their prey, and then later absorb the like they cut it up with the big beak in the first head, but then you use the second head to kind of like munch it up, or like they use the two heads to kind of tear it apart, like
Mm.
basically the claws of a crab. And it's like at least biomechanically feasible, and it's just a world where the direct mouth to head integration never properly evolved, so they
Mm.
ran with it. And since this is a creative project, it's kind of like one of the brass tacks I stick to.
Mm.
But there are a lot of decisions like that. Another nice thing is another thing I wanted to comment on with Snayad is that a lot of our like animal shapes and body forms are actually predicated by the plants and the natural ecosystem in these animals live
True.
in. So if you maybe change the structure of the plants dominating a landscape, then you get a vastly different cast of characters. So on Snayad, there are actually these like new floral ecosystems called sprog or citadel trees. For example, citadel trees are like these like imagine like very thick growths of trees growing on top of each other, kind of like half shorn skyscrapers, but they're like spaced like one every 2 miles on a big plain. So this is like a plain with lots of like these giant tree stumps dotting it. And around the tree stumps, there's like a bush and maki and stuff like that. So during the day, it's like animals browsing the plain. At
Mm.
night, all these monsters come out of the citadels to hunt them. So it's
Mm.
like a whole different ecosystem and way of living. The same thing with Sprog. Sprog is basically unique to Snayad. Imagine the ground being covered with masses of wet sponges. They retain water. So
Yeah.
they're like hard to kind of walk on. So on these surfaces, you get more like snake-like creatures or like things with like padded feet so they can walk easier.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to make the commentary about the plants and the landscape affecting the development of large-bodied animals, and that's going well.
I love that exercise of like, you know, you change something in the environment, you change something, and then from there you design, well, how would that adapt? How would that affect?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you get
yeah.
some interesting fiction out of doing that sort of stuff. One speculative thought I like to have is like if humans evolved from more of a reptilian place or more of a
Ooh.
cold-blooded place, and you
Mm-mm,
know, reptiles don't need to eat as often as we do because they
mm-mm,
don't need to warm their bodies. And
mm-mm.
because of that, you know, chances are restaurants wouldn't be a thing because eating wouldn't be as much of a social act potentially
Yeah,
because it's, you know, something we're doing
exactly.
once a month, once every few weeks, whatever. And it's more of a maintenance thing. And maybe in place we get body warming locations where you go and just
Huddle.
huddle and, you know, you lay under some very fine infrared, very well crafted light and
Mm-mm.
you just warm up in very particular ways or something. And you talk with
Yeah.
your family while you do it.
Instead of
And
cushions, you have instead of food critics, you have cushion critics. Another thing with another thing with being a reptile is that they're not social in the way mammals are because they hatch out of
true.
eggs.
Yeah.
So you could also have. I actually had a similar fantasy, but ended up in a different place.
Mm,
And basically, it was during an arts lecture somebody else was giving, and the speaker said, "We only make art for other people to see." I said, "What if people made art for no one to see?" And then I imagined this like other reptile human inhabitation where like you hatch out of an egg,
yeah.
you don't know your parents exactly, but somehow society is there to like take care of basic things. You collaborate out of necessity, but mostly everyone's to themselves.
Mm.
In your house, you paint, but only because you like to look at it. And I always thought about like what that art would look like and how it would be from regular, more social sorts of art. But yeah, that's a great thing about speculative evolution. Like it's just so much more beyond just like drawing strange creatures, but it's actually like a really useful sandbox for science, philosophy, even social issues, I think.
Hmm.
And I think it makes anyone involved in it all the more wealthier intellectually for having indulged in it.
And that's like, you know, because speculative fiction is a pretty massive
Mm-hmm.
genre. It's not even really a genre. It's more of just, I don't know, it consumes so many other genres under its umbrella. But it's like, it is just a lot of books are like, change one aspect of society, what
Mm-hmm.
happens? And like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a lot of my writing. And then like, or, you know, you have books that speculate on political shifts and books that speculate on economic
Ooh,
shifts and historical fiction where you
that
just like change something in history. And that's it's the art of and thought of speculative fiction, and it's the practice of breaking your normal, like the
there's a whole
things. Yeah.
subgenre, alternative history, which is I think like a close sibling of speculative evolution. I really like
Mm,
that genre too.
I did a whole alt fiction, alt alt Italian bubonic plague
Ooh.
thing. Yeah, that was fun. Um,
So the Renaissance never takes off, or like what's the
it
as they call it these days, what's the canon event? What's
the
the
canon event.
yeah.
I guess really all that happens is the virus isn't it's a bit more sinister and a bit more intentional, I guess. So
Mm,
it's more of a plague thing like that, and it's no, I don't. I guess I don't speculate far into the future because I actually designed it to be a platform for a role playing event. So you're actually not you don't go further into the future. You really kind of stay in that event of the virus is
mhm.
breaking out, something's happening, and then it's more of a speculation on what is happening because there are some unique qualities to this virus that are people aren't just dying, some other things are going on that are pretty
You must have
extraordinary.
some cool plague doctor outfits, that's for sure.
Well, that was the thing that so I went pretty medieval with it. I went to the first outbreak, and it wasn't until I was pretty deep in that I realized like plague doctor outfits and even Nostradamus and them, like they didn't come along until the second outbreak, which was much further
Yeah,
along in
yeah.
history. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm bringing them in anyway because Nostradamus will be here anyway because he's too integral to the plot I've got going on, and I'm writing this world anyway, so I say he's there.
Ah, nice, nice. They used to blame all sorts of stuff from the plague, like
Oh my gosh.
swallows were considered to be vectors at some point. It was very weird. I
Once
remember.
again, fear of the Jews. Once again,
Oh, of
they
course.
got a brunt of that. That was terrible.
Are you also of Jewish background yourself? I am.
Yeah, actually on my mom's side, I don't practice but my mom just recently started getting very involved with that side of her. She's learning Hebrew, practicing again.
Mazel tov. It's for me. It's even stranger because I mean, in my family, we knew for a long time that there was something like this, but
mm,
nobody quite knew how or when. And we're all registered as like Turkish Muslims,
mm,
but it's just so either they were members of this Sabbatean group, which kind of like it's a whole other weird tangent we could get into. Basically, they followed a false messiah in the year 1666. I'm not making this up.
mm,
And when the messiah got too serious, the Ottoman authorities forced him to convert, or else
mm,
some families believed so deeply in this messiah that they converted to Islam alongside him,
mm,
but kept marrying among themselves with a sort of crypto-Jewish identity. So we either thought either we have that sort of background, or throughout Ottoman history, the Ottoman Empire was a very multicultural empire. There were many Jews who converted to Islam just because they could get government jobs, for example.
yeah.
And so either we had that or something like that. And that, but when I did a DNA test, it comes out something like 30% Sephardic, and the rest comes out Italian or West Mediterranean. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you might probably know. I also wrote some books about local Jewish history in the.
I saw something like I can't remember the title, but I remember seeing that under your works.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a whole other side of me that I'm nice to. It's nice to have. I don't feel religious at all, but I think there's a certain sensibility that comes with this background, and I really value it, and I think it adds a lot to my life.
I very much so admire the sense of community that the Jewish community, they go out of their way to build it,
Mm,
and it's really like it's important to them, and like
mm,
you
mm,
see it,
mm.
like they live in similar communities, they stay together, and they really like you could look at it and kind of be like, oh, that's insular of them, whatever, but it's like, no, they're not shutting anyone out, but they're just choosing to
Mhm.
prioritize community, and it's really beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly. Yeah, I really like that about mm, Jewish culture. I also think there are like some unchanged brass tacks. Like even if you're like the most atheist Jew ever, that there's just a certain way of looking at life, and like
Mm,
I mean, because of this sort of um, unintegrated background, like usually Jewish people are one of the first groups in any community who can say, "Come on, that's bullshit," and I think that's really valuable.
yeah,
And
100%.
well, nice, nice. What are the chances, huh? Long
Yeah,
distance cousins
that's
talking
yeah.
about dinosaurs and reptile people.
Um, well, I think we'll go ahead and start closing it down there.
All
Um,
right.
do you, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to
Yes,
in
I have
closing?
two remarks actually. One, if you're interested in my stuff, I also recommend my YouTube channel, which is
Oh yeah.
youtube.com/CM Kosemen. I also recommend, like, if you like this conversation, if you support me on patreon.com/CM Kosemen, as little as $1 a month, like you get to see all sorts of surreal paintings no one else sees, excerpts from All Tomorrows and my other projects. and it's really, really, really welcome. Also, I have the second thing going on, which is this sort of American outreach project I'm doing. It could be also European or the UK outreach. I don't mind. But
Mm.
I just like, I'm looking at analytics on YouTube and my website, and it's like 78% of everyone comes from the States. And
Wow.
judging from the fan mail I get, like almost in every small town in the US, there seems to be this weird All Tomorrow's kids who are like into my stuff. So I really like that. I'm really
Yeah.
happy about that. And long story short is I'm looking for opportunities to come to the United States as a speaker for any event you might have. You don't need to give me money, only cover my tickets and accommodation costs, and I'd be happy to be your guest. You could sell tickets, charge money. I don't care. You know, just get me in a bed and breakfast. I like to have like bacon and like stuff of American food. I'm really huge fan. Like feed me, house me, ship me, and I'll be your speaker. Also, we're looking to hold exhibits of my surreal art. We didn't talk much about that here, but that's okay.
Mm.
So if you like go deeper into the Kosemen verse, and if you like my surreal art, and if you happen to be managing an art space in the States or something, that I would be like forever be in your debt. So in those notes, I say thank you and thanks for featuring me in your podcast. Really
Yeah,
happy.
no, thanks for coming on. Like it's honestly very great. And yeah, if he mentions a Patreon, a YouTube channel, all these things, have a look at his stuff, his stories. He creates incredibly rich worlds that are just so grippingly rooted in reality. At least that's what I think. And his art style is, I'm not even, whatever. Take a
Thank
look.
you.
You're going to love it as well. And then from there, you decide what you want to do. But chances are you're going to want to do something. I know I listened to his story and immediately wanted to reach out to him to talk to him. So there you go. Lots of,
Thanks.
yeah.
And also, like, if fellow listeners have their own podcasts, I'll turn up for the opening of an envelope. So, like, hit me up. Yeah, I'll speak for any occasion.
There you go. So on these usually when we end these podcasts, we usually end with a quote from someone, and I just wanted to quickly drop a quote that actually you said. I'm not sure if I'm pretty sure it was you. You said it at the end of your TED Talk, and I just thought it was very on point. But you said you're talking about how an important part of science isn't to say I have the answer, I have the conclusion, or anything like that. You said it's to say here lies a mystery. What do
Yeah,
you think it looks like? And
yeah. I think
just,
that's a quote I can stand behind. Like, science is not the pursuit of it is the pursuit of answers to some degree, but it's actually like the nailing down of problems. Like, so identify questions, and each answer opens up new questions, and that's like the nice infinite generative thing about life in general.
and it informs both science and art, which are really just two branches of they're both very creative aspects.
Yes, I think art and science are like this forcibly divorced couples,
Yeah.
but I think science without art is inhuman, and I think art without science is just frivolous.
I feel that.
So that could be another quote for the day.
There we go. Well, thank you very much
Oh
for your
man, the
time.
pleasure is mine. Have a nice day.
You as well. And there you have it. Thanks again for listening. And just one final note for the end here. We do have our anthology, The New Mythic, out on Amazon. Nominated for not one, but 2 awards. And it's just a great book. Go get yourself a copy if you haven't yet. The ebooks are very cheap. The paperbacks are less cheap, but they're also gorgeous. So definitely worth it. As well as if you've liked what you've heard so far, don't be shy about giving us a review. It would mean a lot to us, and it helps other people find it and makes us feel all sorts of warm, fuzzy feelings. Leave us a comment as well. We've gotten a few comments here and there, and it's always great to engage directly with the people that are listening to this, because we like talking about it. It's nice to hear other people like talking about it, all that stuff. So yeah, leave a review if you haven't yet. It would mean a lot. And thanks once again for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
You're listening to Prose and Cons, the Precipice Fiction podcast.